Let's get more on that now with Andy Mok, a senior research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. He joins us now via Skype from Beijing. Good to have you with us, Andy. We know more about the Biden end of the call than the Xi end. Xinhua said that it was candid and in-depth, but gave little detail on what the Chinese president's intentions are towards support for Moscow. What's your take on it?
Well, thanks for having me, Adrian. And I think you're absolutely correct that the Western media narrative, really, which is nothing more than dutifully being stenographers for the U.S. government, has framed this as Biden warning Xi. But I think this is meant purely for domestic political consumption. If you look at the Xinhua readout, it notes three things. One, the call was constructive. The second is that both presidents agreed to instruct their teams to put the China-U.S. relationship on the right track. And this is vitally important and much more important than any decisions reached on Ukraine. But the third point did address the Ukrainian conflict, and that was to say that China and the U.S. both agreed that steps need to be taken to peacefully resolve this conflict.
But we still know little about what China's intentions actually are towards Russia right now. Will it provide material support in terms of weapons to use in Ukraine? Will it prop up Russia economically?
Well, I think the Chinese stance has been very clear all along in that it is maintaining an impartial and objective stance. It is neither choosing Russia's side or the U.S.'s side. And here I want to point out, too, that this conflict could be ended in days if the U.S. Stopped all military supplies to Ukraine. And it's tragic that its role in prolonging this conflict in terms of the human cost. So I think the Chinese position on this is that it is maintaining normal diplomatic relations, economic relations, other relations with Russia, and that nothing's changed.
You say that it's neutral and impartial. I come back to this again, Andy. Is China going to supply Russia with weapons for use in Ukraine? Is it going to prop up Russia economically?
That I cannot answer. Again, we can see that China's trade and investment relationship with Russia has grown dramatically over the last few years. And again, the Chinese government stance has been it is maintaining normal relationships with Russia.
What about Beijing's rhetorical support and absence of denunciation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine? You say that China is taking this neutral line. Why?
Well, I think this is the most effective, if not the only path to a peaceful resolution. Again, the Western media narrative has been that this is an unprovoked attack by Russia. But those that even take half an hour to study the complex history of Russia-Ukraine relations will see that there really is, it's a complex situation, and the best path forward is to encourage both sides to a peaceful resolution. The other thing I have to say, too, is let's not conflate condemning with abstaining. So these are two very different things. And if we look at even the other countries around the world, India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, even Mexico, have not joined the U.S. in condemning Russia. So I think the U.S. actually runs the risk of being isolated. And this is the real story, is that not as many countries are with the U.S. as is reported in the Western media.
Andy, I want to point out that the countries you mentioned are minnows compared with China and its might.
Well, Adrian, India is also 1.3, 1.4 billion people. So I guess it depends how we want to define minnow.
Okay, all right. I'll take that one. Andy, it's always great to talk to you. Many thanks indeed for being with us once again. Andy Mok there via Skype in Beijing.
Thank you, Adrian.